remember, my data was kind of slim, so it kind of transitioned on me. So going on, these were my contacts, Dr. Barr, Rick Cowart, and Tim. They're actually in an all-day meeting today, so they can't be here, but that's all right. Okay, so the problem was to come up with something that would still help them improve their inventory, because that was something that Cowart was very, very interested in. In the world of car sales especially, making sure that you don't have too much overage or that you have enough cars in stock is extremely important, because it's a dynamic day-to-day business. And their sales are seasonal by months. There's a daily holding cost for each car, and they have a lead time of 90 days to get the cars over here from Japan. So it takes them a while. They have to know in advance, and so it becomes a complex problem. So my purpose was to find the seasonality index of each month based upon their historical sales data, and to find leading indicators that they can then track going forward to better forecast what their sales are going to be, which then impacts how much they order. So here are the big questions. We're going to start with this one over here. What should be done about the missing data for May of 2007? May of 2007 had no numbers when they gave it to me. It was really nice, really. So what I did was I took the sales for May of each of the other 4 years and took a percentage, and they were actually all at about 9%. So I used the assumption that May of 2007 would be at about 9% and backed it out from there. Are there any local indicators that would help track to our sales and help in a leading manner indicate the future of our sales? So looking at the Dallas area, what can we look at? We can look at unemployment, we can look at the business cycle index, we can look at the consumer price index. I looked at various things, and I'm going to talk about that later, but there are things to look at. How does that affect ordering of inventory? Obviously, I put that out there a couple moments ago. If they know how much they're going to sell, they then know how much they need to order. And so which indicators should be used, what focus should the indicators have, and how many should be used? We'll go through that in a minute. So the general approach was I generated the numbers for May, and then I did a decomposition on all of the sales numbers using Dr. Barr's smoothie program. That way there was a trend equation, and I knew what the error was in the forecast, and so then the task was to set out to mitigate that error through multiple linear regression. Okay, so this is what Smoothie gave me, some of it, and the aim is to mitigate that pink column. So using MLR, I looked at the Consumer Price Index, LIBOR, which is the London International Bank Overnight Rate. It sets the interest rates that people start out with when they have to take a loan on, especially on a big item like a car or a house. It really does set where our interest rates are going to be. And then I looked at the Business Cycle Index in Dallas, because they're in Dallas, so that makes it local, and that makes it focused in on them and their environment, and unemployment rate in Dallas. And 2 of them worked and 2 of them didn't. And the data has to be at least 3 months ahead, because it has to correlate in a leading manner, and they won't have, if they're ordering for May, they won't have what May's going to be, because they're ordering it in February. So, then, this is what I came up with when I took at first I said, okay, unemployment, yeah, that definitely should correlate, because people don't have jobs, they're not going to buy a high-end car like an Infiniti. Or at least they shouldn't, because that would be kind of stupid. So taking that into account, we have the actual is the green line, and then the rounded forecast, I called it, is what came out of the smoothie. And then the red line, which tracks closer, you can see, to the green line in most cases, is, no, the rounded forecast is the new one. The old forecast is the decomp. Okay, red and yellow. The yellow one is the new one, and it tracks closer, you can see, because it is above, like especially at that really big peak, it is closer to the green than the red one is. So that makes it a good indicator. And it tracked at about 0.5 on the R-squared, but you're not going to find something that tracks completely. And so instead of finding something that tracks completely, my aim was to find two things that would together track well. And so using the Dallas Business Cycle Index, those numbers are available on the Dallas Fed, which is the Federal Reserve Bank, but located in Dallas. They have all sorts of numbers on all sorts of data. And so it is the blue line, and the blue line you can see is even closer than the yellow line was, and so we're doing even better. But you can see that when you look at the arrow lines down on the bottom, there are sometimes places where they overlap, and there are sometimes places where it doesn't quite mesh correctly, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the variables in the equation are the period, which is the month, because when you do smoothie, it cycles out all the months as a variable. The seasonality index, the cyclical index, so what kind of cycle we're in, the unemployment rate 3 months prior, and the Dallas business cycle rate 6 months prior. I think that's actually switched. I think it's 6 months prior on the unemployment. I think I had a typo. Oops. So the equation gets to be really complicated looking because it has lots of numbers, but it essentially comes down to this. This all came out of those modeling softwares. And so it gives you this final equation, a lot of numbers. When I talked to Sewell, they were like, where did these numbers come from? Trust me, they came from legitimate sources. I didn't pull them out of the air. It's all good. But the logic is that all of these things are going to go into the final forecast. So you have what period it's in and what the initial trend baseline is. You have that. And you have what the season and the cyclicalness is. And you have what the unemployment rate was 6 months ago, and you have what the business cycle index was 3 months ago, so in your current ordering month, and that all comes into play with how you're going to sell your cars in the future. Because it all has an effect. If the Dallas business cycle isn't doing well, or if people aren't employed, they're not going to be buying cars it's an aesthetic, emotional purchase. Okay, so the issues that I came up with, unemployment and the business cycle index sometimes work against each other because if it doesn't track perfectly and because of the way that the model is set up, if they're both going in the same direction, then it's weird. There were a couple cases where they were going in directions where they were adverse to each other, and so then it was becoming even greater of a problem than the first forecast with unemployment. But in most cases that didn't occur. I think that only occurred in like a third, less than a third, 30% of the cases. And if there had been data on other indices that tracked, then potentially that could have been mitigated some more. So, and you can see we've looked at this before. So the conclusion, unemployment rate and the business cycle index relate. They there's a limited outcome, as I addressed, and something that they could potentially look at in the future is to try personal income and outlays. I couldn't find information focused in on Dallas on this, but that would be something that comes into play because that tracks directly how much disposable income a person has on average. And he would want to stay locally focused because he sells locally. He doesn't sell to people in New York, so that shouldn't come into play, that shouldn't factor into his numbers. What's interesting is when I presented this to him, they actually do something like this, which was surprising. He didn't tell me how he did it in the beginning, but they actually do something like this, and Carl Sewell's brother came up with it, no cousin. So it was really interesting, and that's it. Any questions?
Well, I wouldn't worry about not hitting on the money because nobody can forecast demand very well.
Yeah, it's especially in an industry like that.
Especially like the last year, we had a lot of complicating factors.
Yes.
Politics
Yes. All sorts of stuff.
and our next presenter is going to be Quinn.
Does it go? It's off, so you can't even see the X. Good luck.
I just saw that as well, like that.
Okay.
This is the PDF group.
It's in video.
Yeah, this is the other one. That's the PDF version of. Color. Full screen now. I just don't like this one. Those issues. If you read it. Is that good with everyone? Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay. I did the PDF just in case the PowerPoint didn't work. I guess that's all I got. You can't see it. All right. My name's Quinn Myers. I did a project for Sewell Cadillac, specifically Bob Carpenter, who's the president of GM. Senior design, and let's get into it. Did that work? That works? Okay. So a little bit of problem background. Sewell Cadillac was one of the first in the Dallas area, if not the country, to offer loaner cars to their service customers. And so they were kind of a pioneer in the service industry by offering that. Back when, they always had one limitation, which was you had to buy your car from Sewell Cadillac, and it worked well for them. Obviously, they are around and they deal with just about every car, as Jordan kind of pointed out. Do with every make of car. Walk-ins were welcome, walk-ins were encouraged, and it always worked well for them. Their customers appreciated the ability to just walk in with their car and be able to drive out in a loaner car. So that's that. Now, there's kind of a come one, come all mentality, and because of that, loaner cars are in high demand. No longer do you have to purchase your car from Sewell Cadillac to receive a loaner car. You actually, regardless of if you're servicing a Cadillac or not, if you have an appointment or not, obviously walk-ins are still encouraged. Whether you bought your car from Sewell or not, and how long your service will take, they'll give you a loaner car. So they've kind of de-evolved from where they started to, as I said, this come one, come all mentality, and they're experiencing high demand, and their loan car office really can't keep up with the demand that they are experiencing. So based off that, Bob Carpenter, Professor Barr, and I came up with a project based on the problem that they're having stockouts, which often occur, and their supplementation, if they run out of loaner cars, is that they use Enterprise as their supplement. So they rent cars from Enterprise and provide those cars to their customers. The problem with that is their customers are receiving kind of a subpar vehicle, a subpar loaner car. They're not receiving a Cadillac, and it was always kind of in Cadillac's best interest, or Sewell Cadillac's best interest, because you're providing customers with often a newer model of the Cadillac that they already have as a loaner car. So that's just kind of an ability to advertise and market directly through their customers. Another problem they're experiencing is that currently customers are slow to return their loaner cars. Sometimes, as I said, the models are newer, so they'd rather drive the loaner car than the car that they have waiting that's completed service. So that's an issue with the recycle time and getting loaner cars back in the system. Customers are often unhappy with the loaner car available, especially when they receive an Enterprise supplement, as I was saying. And also current costs are too high. I think costs can always be lowered, especially in Sewell's mind. So that was a problem. My objectives were mainly to provide a tool that would help them with loan car inventory management, and then some kind of lower objectives were to suggest just process alterations, just to help them see if there's anything going on with some of the cycles that I'll show you in a minute. So this helps you kind of visualize really simple cycle. This is from one customer to another and how it goes through. It kind of starts with customer A, and from the loan car office, customer A gets a car. They keep the car for somewhere around an average of 60 hours. Sometimes that's up to more than 2 weeks. So they keep the car as long as they need it until they hear that the service has been completed, and they are encouraged and requested to return their car within 12 business hours of being notified that their service was completed. Then they return it to the service center, where they're given their car back, and a porter runs the recycled loan car to get washed and gassed. That takes about 20 minutes, and then it's back into the loan car fleet to be issued to a new customer, to customer B. So this is one of the cycles that I was suggested or asked to come up with kind of some process alterations to help them increase this cycle time. And just even talking to people that worked in the loaner car office, the main little bottleneck there is at the wash and gas when the porter brings the car to get washed. Obviously they don't wait for it to get washed, and they just expect another porter to get the car when it's done being washed. But often, because they're so attentive to their customers, most of the porters kind of hang out in the service center. So oftentimes, especially when it's busy and there's a lot of customers coming in the vehicles, nobody's there at the wash to see when the loaner cars come off the line. So I suggested that a dedicated person, a dedicated porter there to kind of expedite that process, get the cars back into the cycle would be good. But other than that, I think it's a pretty simple cycle, and I didn't have much suggestions there. This is the loan car fleet cycle. The cars that are in the loan car fleet come from two different areas. They're called 90-day cars and 12-month cars, and based on based on the cars, based on which it is, if it's a 90-day car or a 12-month car, you get different rebates from GM. The 90-day cars are the kind of the best deal for Sewell Cadillac, because they are sold as new cars, and they get a higher rebate for those cars. So ideally they'd want to have all 90-day cars, but the problem with that is that you have new cars on your new car lot with miles on them. So if you have a maximal amount of 90-day cars, your new car lot will be full of cars with miles. So they say about 15 to 20 cars a month is about their limit. And then again, the supplement with Enterprise is off to the side. So I got a little data. It was kind of me figuring out how to make a tool based on the data they could give me, I think, as Jordan experienced. Obviously, they can't see down the road. They didn't know 2 years ago that I was going to step in and do this project, so they can't see into the future. They don't know what data they need. So I had to work with what they could give me, and this is a little table. I hope you can read some of it, of the data that I received. Basically, I got some numbers on return loaner cars and demand for loaner cars. and that's split up into their different, whether the person has a reservation, it's a walk-in, or they actually have a service where they drop off loaner cars. So that, so I had demand and requests, or demand and returns, and that was the info I received, or the data I received. And based off that, I worked some means and medians and standard deviations by day, and then for all the days. And then from there made some fancy little graphs, which helped. And then the final pieces of data that were relevant and pertinent to the project that I was doing were their monthly costs, so their depreciation and their interest, as well as their rental costs. So that kind of gave me a ballpark of what they're already spending and what kind of their demands are and their costs are through that. So using that data, I developed a tool with the help of Dr. Barr, and this is the non-technical user side of the tool. Dr. Barr called it a scorecard, so I kept it with that. I never really understood why it's called a scorecard, but I like scorecards. So we went with the Sewell Loan Car Scorecard. The top in the blue is the assumptions, and that is the user input side, and then the bottom is the results. That's the green part. That's the kind of output you get from running the tool. So on the assumption side, you have a bunch of different options, and this is based on kind of what you're trying to do with your fleet. You have your average purchase price of a new loan car, and the defaults are on the right. So this is the information that they're currently using, or the kind of the benchmarks that they're using currently from the data I got from them. So you have the purchase price of a new car, the monthly depreciation, average enterprise rental price per day, average enterprise days per contract, interest rate, starting fleet size, on down from there. And then the bottom two is the number of years in the sample and the number of working days per year. And so that depends, or that changes this simulation, and this is that's what the non-technical user side runs. It runs this simulation, and we're going to kind of go into it just a little bit, just so I can kind of explain what I did. Where I got to with this project is I did more of supplying a tool for them than actually analyzing what the tool could tell me, because there's a lot of parts to their business and a lot of like technical little nuances between the 90-day cars and the 12-month cars that they didn't have data to supply me. So my analysis was less than creating a tool for them to analyze. So within the simulation, there's the demand side, and that's a little zoom in of the demand side. This little column C and D here is the fleet turnover. I didn't use that, but I know that obviously they're bringing cars into their fleet and taking cars out, depending on what kind of cars they are and how long they have to stay in their cycle. So they can use that, and that changes the pool size, which is the fleet size. Pool available start. So this is by day. Pool available start is the cars available at the beginning of the day that carries over from the previous day. And then the nuts and bolts of this whole simulation is the total demand based on the random numbers, and that's off of a management science normal distribution formula that takes a random number, takes those means that I calculated as well as the standard deviations, and comes up with, I call it a random demand, but it's not really a random demand because it's based on the mean and the standard deviation. So it's based on that normal distribution, gives you your demand, and that's broken down by day. That's broken down by the means and standard deviations by day. So it's not for all days, so it's a little more specific to the day of the week, because they notice different demands and returns based on the day of the week. How's my time? 5 minutes? Okay. So the only thing that I'm going to kind of get into, the thing I could have changed and altered, is seasonality of it. They experience a lot more demand in the summer than they do in any other months, and I didn't have any data to back that up, so I couldn't work that into my tool, my simulation. But that's where total demand, right now it's just by day, but it could be by day and by season. So that's something I could change. And then you see top right, that's the means and standard deviations I was talking about by day. So then we go to the return side of it, of the simulation, and this is a part that kind of makes it a little more of a robust simulation, because they experience, obviously I can't just use an average for the number of days before somebody returns the car, and so I use kind of a probability bell curve, if you will, to to kind of map out how the customers return their cars. And as you can see for this cell here, the returns for that day are based on the 5-day returns for the demand for the day 5 days prior, and then 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. So you can kind of see how it works down, and that's your returns for that day. So it kind of spreads out the returns a little more and gives you a better picture of the returns for the day. And the only other part is the estimated available, and that's so you can map out the cars being used in the day. Dr. Barr and I figured that if 100 people return cars on day 1, you're not going to be able to get all those 100 cars back into new customers' hands because people will return the cars late in the day. So we figured about 85% could be recycled. So based on the number of returns, 85% are used that day to give to new customers. So now we go to rentals and costs. I wish I had a laser pointer to help, but number of rentals required for the day is based on the demand and based on the availability. If they had more demand than availability, number of rentals goes up based on the demand. And then there's the available cars at the end of the day, and the checked out cars at the end of the day. That's the difference between the pool size and the available cars at the end of the day. And then we have the cost side, which is on your right, depreciation, interest, and enterprise, rental supplementation. That's broken down by the day. So you can get kind of a better picture of what the costs are going to be. And that kind of helps with the number of working days per year and number of years in your sample that you want to use. And then from there, that's the results portion of it. And based on what you put into your assumptions, you can refresh and run, and the random numbers will keep being created. And so you can run this several times and take an average of what your total fleet cost is, and then it's annualized out with an average, and it's split up between fleet costs, which is depreciation and interest, and then your rental costs. So that's my tool. That's the simulation I created, and let's see. There we go. And that's my project. Any questions?